Yo, what's good YouTube, man? It's Gabe with another Fan TV, back at you in the video. At the content of this video, go smash that like button. At the content of this channel, go and subscribe, man. Look, with the 27th pick in the NFL draft, the Ravens select Malaki Starks, safety out of Georgia, right? So I'm going to talk about this pick, in a couple different ways, right? We'll talk about, do I like the pick? Did it make sense? How does it help the Ravens? And we'll talk about the prospect that the Ravens passed over to make the selection, right? So let's start with the prospect himself, Malaki Starks. So, 3-year starter, leader on the Georgia defense. Coaches raved about him. Coaches loved him. We know how Georgia feels about their defense, right? So to be a 3-year starter on that team and make consistent plays like he did on that team, that's a good sign, right? All right. Things that I can say to describe him: athletic, rangy, a true or free safety, right? And he has playmaking ability on the back end as well, right? Now, only had 6 interceptions in his career at Georgia. I believe he only had one last season, but I've seen him make plays on the ball in the air, turn his head around and go get it, right? You've seen that if you watch the draft tonight, they show highlights of it, right? But like if you just watch his game, he does that, okay? So also, I believe that he has a versatile alignment, right? He's going to play safety for the Ravens, obviously, but he can do a couple of different things as well, right? So, for me, it made a lot of sense, and also they drafted a good player, right? When the board fell the way it fell for the Ravens had a couple different options of ways that they can go, and we'll talk about some of those prospects in a second. But Malachi Starks to me made a lot of sense, right? Think about what the Ravens had to go through last year, right? Terrible play on the back end. It only stabilized when they moved Kyle Hamilton back there and also Darius Washington, right? So let's talk about Darius Washington. Now, Darius Washington signed his what do you call it? His second round tender, right? His restricted free agent tender. He's back. The Ravens like to have 3 safeties, and Darius Washington is a guy that honestly, this could be his last season with the Ravens, right? We don't know, right? But for this season coming up, Ravens like to have 3 safeties out there. Malachi Starks can compete for the starting job. To me, Malachi Starks is probably going to start day one, and Darius can rotate in, right? This is nothing against Darius Washington. He's a good player. I've been advocating for Darius Washington for multiple years at this point, right? So I love Darius Washington game. I love what he brings to the Ravens. But it's kind of like how I think about Voorhees and Falele on the offensive line. There's nothing that tells you that Darius Washington should be an automatic set it and forget it starter, right? Nothing that tells you that. I'm sorry, okay? But he's a very good player, okay? The Ravens still needed more depth in the safety room, right? Both things can be true, okay? So for me, from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense, right? So I'm a fan of adding Malachi Starks into the safety room. The Ravens now have a quality secondary once again, right? Brandon Stevens fall off hurt. Marcus Williams fall off especially hurt because that one was very, very random, right? Brandon Stevens hit a peak last 2 years ago in 2023 season where we were like, wow, he's really turned the corner, right? Marcus Williams just turned into a completely different player a version of himself that we haven't seen before, right? So those two in the secondary really hurt the Ravens last year, right? So now with the Ravens, you got Nate Wiggins, right? Chidobe Awuzie, Marlon Humphrey, obviously. Then you got Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks, or Darius Washington on the back end. I like that rotation. And hopefully you get something out of TJ Tampa this season. We'll see how that goes, right? He pretty much redshirted his rookie season, right? He was coming off of multiple different injuries, this and that. So I like the position the Ravens secondary is in, right? So if you want me to give you a grade on this pick, I would say it's a B plus A minus kind of pick, right? Malachi Starks, I think, has the potential to be the next great Ravens defensive back drafted in the first round, right? I truly believe that. So for the Ravens, it made a lot of sense. Smart, tough, physical player. He's a Raven all day. Okay. Now let's talk about the other side of it, right? The prospect the Ravens passed over to make the selection. Okay, because can't talk about one without the other. All right. So now these are guys on the board that I thought the Ravens could take if they, before we knew it was going to be Malachi Starks. Will Johnson, Mike Green, Donovan Ezaraku, Josh Simmons. We'll just go down the list. Will Johnson, if you would have gone back, 7 months, 8 months, whatever, people would tell you that Will Johnson would have been a top 5 pick, top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Now, a lot of things between now and then has changed for Will Johnson, right? He's gotten injured. He hasn't really tested it as far as anything. He had a private workout. He had his pro day and he had a private workout. He didn't run the 40 at either one. There are some questions about his knee injuries. You're seeing rumors that the word chronic is being used for his knee injury, stuff like that, right? So I don't, these are all rumors. Who knows if it's true? But he's fallen quite a bit, right? And I thought that this kind of play that the Ravens make, right, where it's like, oh, a guy that was a top 10 talent is slipping in the draft. It's very similar to Kyle Hamilton, right? Kyle Hamilton was projected to be with the number 2 pick. I think it was the Texans at that time. Was projected to be like at least a top 3 draft pick in his draft, right? 40 happens. Oh, is he athletic as we thought he was? This and that, all that kind of BS about Kyle Hamilton, right? He drops to 14. The Ravens snatch him. Okay, so I could have seen the same scenario where this happened to Will Johnson, right? Top cornerback in the draft by all accounts, right? If you go back, and even some people still feel that way, right? And the Ravens snatch him up. Like, wow, how did a play like this fall to the Ravens? I could have saw that happening, but it did. Okay, and I understand it, right? The Ravens had, like I said, the Ravens have invested a lot in corner. They probably still like J Tampa, and we don't know if the injury concerns for Will Johnson are real. We don't know that. All right, Mike Green. Now, Mike Green was a guy who had massive production at Marshall, off the edge, right? But he comes with massive character concerns, right? Character red flags, right? Kind of things that the Ravens have pretty much sworn off, right? He had 2 assault allegations, sexual assault allegations at, I believe, one in high school and one at Virginia, his first college when he transferred to Marshall, right? That, in my mind, that caused him to slip entirely out of the first round. All right, because it's on tape, the physical attributions, the way he gets off the ball, right? The production he had. You can say it's at a smaller school, but then he went to the Senior Bowl and still had a good week at Senior Bowl, right? So to me, it's the off the field stuff that dropped him out the first round, right? And when the Ravens, you can say what you want, they're committed to not drafting guys with off the field character concerns, right? You know, you can say what you want about it. They're committed to that. Okay. So while I thought Mike Green can definitely help the Ravens, he's not the kind of guy that the Ravens are going to bring into the building. Okay. All right. Donovan Izawaku. Now, to me, this was my number one guy, and I've said this multiple times, right? This was my number one guy with the Ravens. If he was to fall on the board, I wanted the Ravens to draft him, right? Now, some of that was I thought Malaki Starks would be gone. I definitely thought a guy like Josh Simmons would be gone by now. But from the people who I thought would be available at this point in time in the draft, I would have drafted Donovan Izawaku, right? Between him and Malaki Starks, I can say it's pretty even. I'm fine either way, and they went Malaki Starks fine. All right. Now, if you follow the draft season, right? You listen to some of these podcasts, listen to Daniel Jeremiah a lot, Move the Sticks, and a couple other places that he's been on. He's been saying that teams are not sure that Izawaku has the necessary power to play consistently on the edge, right? He has a great pass rush plan, has a lot of good moves, very, very, you know, uh, uh, game plan ready in the pass rush game, but they're not sure about his physical attributes. Now, for me, I don't have that kind of concern about him. But if other teams do, the teams on the NFL do, that's why a guy like this with this kind of production, this kind of profile drops out of the first round, right? I expect him to go early in the second round at some point, but that's why he drops out. Now, if the Ravens would have took him over Malaki Starks, I still would have been fine with it, right? Like I said, I still believe that he has the necessary abilities, production, and to me, the ceiling to keep going up. That it was worth the 27th overall pick. The Ravens didn't go that way. That's fine. I really don't have an issue with that. All right. And then lastly, Josh Simmons, right? Josh Simmons was a lot of people's, if he doesn't get hurt, a lot of people believe he's the best offensive tackle in this draft class period, best old lineman in this draft class period, right? So he slips, he falls, he goes to Kansas City at 32. I would have to assume it's just because of teams are worried about the injury history, right? With Josh Simmons, right? Um, Ravens could be the same way, but at the end of the day, the Ravens also drafted David Ojabo, who tore his Achilles at Pro Day. Josh Simmons' injury was longer ago than that. It was during the college football season, so he's had time to fully recover by now. He wouldn't have redshirted this first year, how pretty much David Ojabo redshirted his first year, right? All right, so uh, you know, maybe they just wasn't high on him as to take him. I don't know, right? But I could have definitely saw a plan where you take Josh Simmons, you have him compete at guard to start, or you just have him back up Ronnie Stanley, and learn from Ronnie Stanley. Then boom, in a year and a half, 2 years, you have your starting left tackle already on the roster. Don't have to worry about it, right? So I could have saw that plan. I would have been fine with that plan as well, right? Because the potential, it's kind of the same thing I said with Will Johnson, a guy that was protected to be a top 10, top 15 draft pick is falling right into your laps. Take him, right? So I would have been fine with that too, right? So the way the draft board fell out, there's a lot of players that I like that ended up being in the Ravens range. And they took a good player, Malaki Starks, right? I really don't have an issue with it. The Ravens need to do something to address safety. Okay. It had to happen. All right. Yes, we like our Darius Washington, but he is not the end all be all, right? And we know the Ravens have to play three safeties as well sometimes, right? Marlon Humphrey's going to have a lot of work in the slot this year, but if the Ravens do want to play three safeties, they now have the flexibility to do so, right? It's as simple as that, okay? And then, like we said, they signed a Woozier, but there's no guarantee Woozier is going to go out there and play 75% of the snaps. I would highly doubt that, right? So, say you got packages where Marlowe's on the outside, Nate Wiggins is on the outside, and then you got Malaki Starks, Kyle Hamilton. You could have, Darius in the nickel. You can have Kyle Hamilton in the nickel, right? You can mix it up. You can mix it up. Okay, so it gives the Ravens ultimate flexibility on the back end, and I really, really enjoyed the draft pick. We'll see what day two brings, right? And we'll talk about it there. But that's my thoughts on Malaki Starks, right? I like the pick. Give me your grade for the draft pick of Malaki Starks, man. But it's Gabriel, just on the Fan TV. I'm out.